Zakiya Smalls from Lehigh County Board of Commissioners. If you could tell us about your experience. You're one of the newest members of the board, and congratulations on that.
Thank you, Zach, and thank you to everyone for hosting this and having us as part of your panelists and your panel discussion. You know, I initially had an entire speech that I wrote and was going to be very political and buttoned up, so to speak, but I think after listening to Cece and Olga just come right off the cuff and just speak straight from the heart, I want to follow that same suit. So, you know, I was a little bit hesitant initially when I thought about this, because at first it was like, okay, yeah, you know, and I'll go down this political route. But as a Black woman and the first elected Black woman in Lehigh County, given what's going on, and sorry, my 7-year-old is losing his mind, so excuse me, but given what's going on right now racially with the climate in this country, I kind of feel as though these types of discussions we have over and over and over and over again. And yet we still find ourselves back in this same position as minorities. And as Black and Latino people, I feel as though we can have this discussion with, you know, other ethnic groups and say, well, these are the things that are bothering us and these are the things that are hurting us and this is what we need you to do. But on the flip side, I feel as though there needs to be inter-conversations amongst white people, inwardly looking at themselves and asking themselves, why is this going on? What can we do to not just be an ally? Because an ally gives the notion that there's some sort of contractual agreement. You do something for me, I'll do something for you. But it's more than an allyship that I think that the Black and Hispanic communities are looking for, okay? We are simply looking for what, you know, Cece mentioned, equality, humanity. You know, it's just so simple, the things that we teach our children, you know, when they go out to school and they're on the playgrounds, how to treat one another. As adults, why do we lose that point of view? Why do we lose these simple values as adults that we are taught as children? You know, I can't wrap my head around it. I love what's happening on a global level with, with what happened with George Floyd was extremely unfortunate. And I do like that now it's globally unaccepted. People of all different races and ethnicities and religions are saying this is absolutely unacceptable. And the fact that now that we have social media, cell phones to record these acts really puts people on blast, you know, but this type of lynching has been happening to our communities for centuries, from slavery through segregation up until now. And they're continuing to happen. And now we have, you know, police misconduct, so to speak, in which it doesn't even matter sometimes from a color perspective, because it's almost as though the police force, even if you have Black officers, I've been in positions where I've been mistreated by a Black officer even more than a white officer. So this is something that is within our police departments that needs to not only be addressed, but needs to be completely taken out and almost start from scratch. You know, as a first female elected commissioner, of course I was told you'll never be elected. You know, no one's gonna vote for you. And then when I did win, you know, people were excited and people were happy, and I'm excited, but why did it take this long for there to be a woman of color to be elected in Lehigh County? You know, why is it that people were comfortable to say, okay, well, you know what, I'll do something good, and, you know, I like what she says and I like what she represents, so, okay, I'll vote for her. But at that table, in that boardroom, when you have 8 other people that are white and only one Black person, And the other only Black commissioner that we've ever had was Commissioner David Jones. So we've had 2 commissioners of color in the entire history of Lehigh County. That again, to me, just says, it begs the question, it begs me to ask the question. Look within yourselves and ask, why are we not comfortable electing minority officials? You know, what is it? What is it that's making us uncomfortable?
Thank you. Thank you very much. I don't want to cut you off, so is that the natural end of your comments for now?
Yes, just for
Okay.
now. I have some more to say. And I'm sorry, I do want to make one other point, and Cece, correct me if I'm wrong. I think with the Black Lives Matter movement, just to kind of piggyback on the question that you had asked prior, Zac, I agree. I don't think in Lehigh Valley, you know, there is a hint or even anything anti-Semitic. I think the Black Lives Matter locally here in Lehigh Valley, and some people will say, oh, well, all lives matter. But that's the point of Black Lives Matter. The point is, if all lives matter, why are there Black lives being treated as such? And this is not to say that all lives don't matter. This is to say, let's all unify together to enforce and push the fact that these are lives too. And right now, these Black lives don't seem to matter to so many people. And again, the question is why? Because there really isn't an answer to that. But what is it that makes us so uncomfortable? What is it?
Thank you. I'm going to turn it over now to Councilman Kerry Myers from Northampton County. If you would please tell us about your experience over there.
Good evening, and thank you for allowing me to be a part of this rap session tonight. Let me tell you something a little bit about myself. I am number 11 of 15 of my parents, John and Helen Myers, from Easton, Pennsylvania.
Wow.
I have spent most of my entire life either working with kids or coaching them or doing various things. My father had an organization years ago that helped the community, and his slogan was, don't be a part of the problem, be a part of the solution. So I've taken that into this life that I'm at right now. I am the only second person of color, because there was a male before me in Northampton County as a councilman, which, if you're confused, Northampton County is council, Lehigh County is commissioners. We're in the process of probably changing that within the next year, so it won't be any confusion. I want to say something to get this thing off correctly. Lately, there's been a lot of publicity about a couple of our celebrities and their anti-Semitic remarks, Nick Cannon and Deshaun Jackson. These 2 gentlemen are making lots of money, and they said something that was hurtful. Just as so many other people have said things that's so hurtful. The problem what we're having here, and as a man that's 66 years old, is that things are not being taught in our school system. And one of the things, if they were taught correctly, they would understand the hell that the Jewish community went through during World War II, and understand what has happened to that community in the same boat what has happened to people of color. And that's awfully important. As we move forth with what we have to do, I have to echo what Cece said. We need to support our people of color. And my fellow commissioner in Lehigh County, she said it correctly. It's very difficult. Now, I am a former Eastern Area School Board member, vice president, president. It's very difficult to go out and be a community representative when the only one you sitting around looking in the room is yourself. At times I find myself in the boardroom looking around, and the only other person of color I see is one of our lawyers. But yet, you know, folks want us to do things, and it's very difficult to do. So I wanted to get that point out there. There's so many things that we need to do, and there's so many things that we can do. But most importantly is we have to change the narrative. Black Lives Matter, the way it's coming across to people and the way we need to express this is understand that they're bringing to the forefront what happened to people of color throughout this country. If you talk about the Lehigh Valley, we're different. We tend to stick together. We tend to take care of our own, but we don't support our own. in Easton, I can tell you that the Jewish community, African American community have been friends and have worked together for years, because I can go back to my mother actually working for a project where she actually was the director of a free dental clinic for people of color and poor people. So that relationship down here is solid, and it's, I don't see anybody getting in the way of that. As far as, you know, what's happened here in the Valley, I was shocked, to say the least, that when I saw what happened up at the hospital with the man that they arrested. But at some point, you know, we are going to have to look at ourselves. When we look at ourselves, we also have to look at the police. You know, on both sides of this equation, there are bullies. Fortunately for us, we don't have bullies in the Valley. Anybody who's out there protesting is compassionate. There are people out here that are of all denominations, all races. Doesn't matter what they're doing. They're out there because they believe we're doing the right thing. I was a young man when Dr. King did his thing in the 60s, and I can remember the March on Washington. And I must say, without going any further, we must take time and a moment to give my condolences to the poor man who just lost his life with his battle with cancer, Congressman. And we need to make sure that our thoughts and prayers are with his family. But we also must understand that John Lewis fought his entire life. And you know what's crazy about it? We get a president of the United States, we get him elected for 2 years, and guess what happens? Racism comes out like there's no tomorrow. Now, what I've done in Northampton County is, because I walked in the first Black Lives Matter, and after that, I had some medical issues which didn't allow me to participate because I need to take care of myself. And what I've done since I've gone through my thing is I have introduced and had it pass a resolution in Northampton County condemning systemic racism. And it was passed 9-0. It's a start. Here in Northampton County, we also have mental health court, and we have other things that we do down here. I don't know what Lehigh County is doing, but that's what we're doing. And it's tough because you have to do what you got to do. And when I did this, I did it because it was necessary. We need to put it out there that racism needs to stop. There's a lot of women out there, and they're out there probably for their kids, and maybe not, maybe because it's for their friends. Because I can guarantee you, if they're in their valley and they're out here walking, a good portion of them have children of color, and they're looking out to make sure their kids are going to be safe. I have children that are mixed. I have grandchildren that are mixed. And I have conversations with my sons for years, and they would just look at me and say, Dad, you know what you're talking about. So they went to college and found out that racism does exist outside this Lehigh Valley. There's something that we're going to have to take and move forward with. Now, if we could take something that I've learned as a Navy veteran, and I go back to boot camp, it's that when we joined the armed forces and joined the Navy, in any boot camp, you learn that that man next to you is your brother in arms. And during the period I was in the service, racism didn't exist. That's because it was done away with when Franklin Delano Roosevelt and then Harry Truman took over. And then John Kennedy did something that really brought people of color to the forefront when he put them in the nation's honor guards, which is something I did in DC. So if you think about it now, people in the military, there's 40% of us are people of color in the military, and yet they're having problems there. So we need to understand, if we can get men who forgot what they taught in boot camp to remember that that guy you're in the foxhole with, you were quite comfortable with, what happened to you when you got home. It hasn't changed from World War II when my father came home and the GI Bill wasn't offered to him. These are things that we need to change. We have to change the narrative. The only way we can do that, folks, is we need to start cleaning house at the state house and at the federal level. It's time for us to use the power of the vote. It's great to protest, but we also got to vote, because the only thing that John Lewis taught us is the power of vote can change things, and that's something we need to do. With that, I think I'm done. I'm ready for any questions.
Thank you, Councilman Myers. Very, very helpful for us. A question that I'll just throw out to all of our participants, Councilwomen, Commissioner, and Councilman. What does it mean when we hear calls to defund the police, and why is there such a strong call for it right now?
So
No, go ahead, Zakiya. Go ahead.
So as county commissioner, I'm going to tread very lightly on this topic. As you know, commissioners, we oversee the budget, and a lot of the monies from our county goes to the police department, a very, very large amount. So I think, you know, the issue with defunding the police is, it's deeper than just taking away funds for more police officers or, you know, uniforms, intercoms, lights, all of those things that actually, you know, run the police departments. I think a lot of it actually is about the militarization of our police departments. You know, when you talk to some, like my grandmother, or even my mom, who is 75 years old, when they were growing up, the police, and now my mother grew up in the South during segregation, and then in her teens, let me just say, moved to New York City. But the police that were in their communities represented their communities. They knew the community. They knew the people in the community. My mom would tell me stories all the time about, you know, my uncles might have, you know, been getting into some trouble down at the bar, you know, having a little drink, maybe one too many. And the chief of police would call my grandfather and say, hey, you got to come get your son. Not arrest him immediately, or they might have even driven him home. Okay, there was some sort of, again, humanity and how they dealt with people in communities. I would say probably in the 80s, we somehow began to militarize our police, and the way in which they began to interact with the community was no longer as though they knew the people in the community, and they can understand that this is a mother, this is a father, this is someone's brother. I might have even gone to school with, you know, any of these individuals. We shop at the same grocery store. That's not happening anymore. We're no longer even putting people in communities that represent those communities. So how can de-escalation occur when you take a police officer who grew up, let's say, in a rural area on a farm, and you place him in an inner city with people that do not look like him or her? He can't relate to their stress. He can't relate to a lot of the things that are going on personally in their lives to then de-escalate a situation from a humanitarian level. So these are defunding the police. You know, things like this are being thrown out because I think police have now become like military dealing with civilians and actually going on these streets as if they're fighting wars, real war. I mean, look at back in the 80s when you had the war on drugs. That set a precedent in especially low-income communities where you had crack. If you were caught with crack, you got, you know, stiffer penalties than cocaine. You know, a lot of Blacks were affected by that entire, you know, pandemic, and people were sent away for a very long time under the RICO laws. And these were non-violent offenders. So going back to what Councilman Myers said, we need to kind of clean house. I think it's not even just about defunding police officers and taking funds away from them. You know, I think that question, it begs the question of, well, if we defund the police, you know, will they still protect our community? Will they call out of work, you know, as we've seen in some states where police officers called out, and I think they called it like Blue Monday or something like that. It's not, it shouldn't be about defunding police officers as much as it should be about cleaning out house, hiring police officers to work in communities that they can represent, you know, hiring people from these communities to become police officers. These are the things that I think we need to start with. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Commissioner Smalls.
Thank you so much, Zakiya, because, wow, yes. I was down at the ATC the other day, and I was talking to a guy down there. He goes by Jalil, and he tells me he sells oils a lot on the streets. If you drive down 7th Street, before you get to 7-Eleven, you probably have seen a Muslim guy on the right-hand side with a table. He's selling oils. And he's told me, like, they'll come 7, 8 cars, police cars, for one person who's having some type of mental health episode or some type of drug and alcohol episode. The cops are not mental health workers. They're not drug and alcohol counselors. The way I see defunding or divesting or reallocation of funds from the police department is not an attack on them. This is being painted as if, you know, those of us who are advocating for it are like anti-cop or anti-police. No, if anything, we're trying to support the police. We're trying to say, hey, look, we want to give you an opportunity to get in, to do what you wanted to do, which was catch the bad guys, not help someone who is having a mental health crisis. There's people who do that as a living. You know, I work with the homeless community, and they've told me the same situations where they're outside, they're sleeping on a bench because we don't have homeless shelters that are 24/7 and 365 for anyone and everyone. And so they're outside sleeping on a bench or sometimes private property, and someone will call the cops on them because who else do you call? So they call the cops on them, and they'll come 5, 6, 7 cop cars for one homeless guy. Tell me what that cop's supposed to do. He or she has no power. What are they supposed to do? So instead, what defunding the police says is, hey, why don't we switch this up a little bit and maybe send 2 outreach workers out there that could actually help the homeless person, maybe have a cop or 2 in the background, and just in case as backup. But for those extra positions, those extra 5 cops that you no longer need to show up because you're sending 2 outreach workers, why don't we use that money to maybe, I don't know, fund a homeless shelter that can actually help that homeless person? So again, it's not about being anti-cop. It's about not putting police officers in situations that they are not trained to handle. They're just not. And then when they get in those situations, then people beat them up because they're not handling them correctly when they never should have been the people to respond in the first place. So when we talk about systemic change, yes, we need to change our police system and you know and how they interact with the community. But I believe we also need to change the systems of who is interacting with the community. You know, just the other night there was a stabbing right where I live. I damn well wanted a police officer to be at that. I didn't want a social worker. I didn't want a mental health worker. I wanted a police officer who had a gun and could actually handle that situation. But the homeless guy sleeping on the bench doesn't need an armed man with a gun. The person who is on drugs and not acting violently and just needs some help, they don't need a police officer with a gun. They need actual help. So that's what defunding means to me. We spent $40 million, about 1/3 of our budget in Allentown for the cops. Again, it's not being anti-cop. I'm so sick of being painted as an anti-cop person, myself and Josh Siegel and Cynthia Mota. We are not anti-cop. We just want the cops to be able to do their job more effectively, to actually go get the bad guys.
Thank you. Anything to add from the other participants?
Yeah, I like to say something. Down here in Easton, they're in the process, or Northampton County, they're in the process of, like I said, they're setting up mental health courts. And that is being taken care of by the judicial end of things. But they're also in the process of trying to get a home that can help folks halfway through. So that's part, Northampton County is maybe ahead of the game from that standpoint, that we are dealing with that particular issue. That's awfully important. But as far as, you know, policing goes, I have done something. I've had what we want to call a courageous conversation summit. It was a listening summit that I had back in a month or so ago, where we brought in the district attorney, and I got together with Harold Levy, the president of Northampton County Black Caucus, and we brought folks into Shiloh Church, and we brought as many police chiefs as we could in Northampton County to come in, and we had a conversation. And anybody that was there to listen. And we talked to police officers and get an understanding where they're coming from, where we're coming from. So that conversation was without a doubt a learning experience on all sides. It's awfully important that we need to figure out what's going on, because both these young ladies are 100% correct. These police officers have a very tough time. They've got no business trying to be social workers. Defunding is not exactly what they're talking about. And I understand where they're calling it. I have to agree with Cece. Yes, we need to put the money where it belongs. But in the same breath, from the county, from the city, they need to reallocate money. So that's being done. Along with that, more training needs to be done. We need to get that with police officers. And we should try to de-escalate. One of the conversations that came out in this was de-escalation. There was a young man from Lehigh University that spoke to us and said, and he's correct, and we all need to understand something, the police control the entire narrative. When they show up, if they're having a bad day, God help anybody else that's there. But if he comes in there with the right attitude, or comes up with the point that he's not trying to make it worse than what it is, a lot of times things can be settled. But the problem with this is right, they bring people in that aren't familiar with it, don't know how to deal with people of color, and sometimes it gets blown out of proportion. But in the same breath, I have spoken to police officers that come up there and they're trying to do the right thing. And we as citizens are like, okay, why you stop me? Because I'm black. Well, you know, we can't always use it as a narrative. I think we all need to take calmer heads when we're stopped and try to see if we can handle it, because you may not have been getting a ticket, but if you lose your mind for a second, you're going to get a ticket or you might get arrested. And we need to understand that it's not easy for law enforcement. And I have to agree with something. I have 8 sisters. And if one of them, should I say, boyfriend, husband, or whatever, decide to come home and beat the hell out of them one day, the police better get there before I do. Because my father raised us, you don't put your hands on women. So we need them for that. We need them for the lunatic that went over in Jersey and shot the judge's son. And we need to make sure we got all that under control. And we need the police to protect us when we're out there marching and we have, how do I want to put it, hidden racists who hide behind the Confederate flag and the craziness that goes on there. We need them to protect us from them, just like we need to protect ourselves. So that's what I want to talk about. But that conversation I had, courageous conversation, is something that I think we all need to look at. We all need to take some time and sit down and see if we can talk to each other. Because if we don't talk to each other, we're going nowhere. We might as well have, you know, our boats in the water and no oars.
Thank you. I didn't want to cut anyone off.
I like to give my 2 cents.
Go ahead, Olga.
Thank you. First of all, I want to say before, although I got a really good training as a community organizer and did a lot of work as a community organizer in the city of Allentown mostly, I worked for the city of Allentown. And I was the neighborhood coordinator for the Whedon City Initiative. And that job was working directly with the community and the police. You know, the structure that the Whedon City had, what is, in my mind, is the ideal scenario where you have the police and the community working together. The city received funding from both state and federal Whedon City. So we had the opportunity, as a neighborhood coordinator, I had the opportunity to go to not only municipalities across the state, the Commonwealth, but also across the nation to take a look at what they're doing, what worked, what didn't work. And it was just more and more evident to me that it is possible to have a relationship, and not just possible, it's important. It has to be. If there's no relationship between members of the police department and the community, it is not, you know, they're there to protect, to serve and protect who? The people of the community, but that includes people of color, you know? So I think that, you know, in the city of Bethlehem, for example, I had a city council meeting, the chief kept on referring to, yeah, when we were asking, are you doing the 8 list, 8 can wait, you know, the list, oh yeah, we do this, we accredited, we are the best accreditation, we are the best. And he was going down like checking the box, yeah, we done this, yeah, we done that. Diversity, oh yeah, we trained all the police officers, check. And then I actually talked directly with Guillermo Lopez, who was the individual that provided the training, diversity training. And it's something that it was one workshop done to every platoon. When that happened, which was 10 years ago, 9 years ago, the chief of police now was not the chief, was a detective. And he didn't attend not even one of the workshops. However, the minute that we asked about diversity, he said, yeah, check, we did it. And what I'm saying with this is not just the fact that he is not saying completely what happened, but just one workshop 10 years ago on diversity does not do it. It doesn't work. That you cannot just check your box. Yeah, I did diversity training. I work for community services for children. That was my first job when I moved to the Lehigh Valley 23 years ago. And every August, the whole month of August, because we started like classes in September, the entire month of August, it was for work, for training. All staff had to go to a whole month of training. CPR, first aid, child growth and development, and diversity. Every August, we spend one day, all staff, on diversity, okay? That's minimal, that's minimal. This is a conversation that, like Councilman Myers saying, the courageous conversation. We need to keep on talking, we need to keep on listening. Just checking one box, yes, I did diversity training, it is just not gonna do it. So to me, defunding the police, and I'm gonna give you a personal example. 4 years ago, I was going through a really tough domestic violence with my husband. And after a few months of horrible situation, he one night actually strangled me. He strangled me. And I will never forget that moment, that I really thought I was gonna die. But police, and he was just making fun of me, saying, you're not gonna call the police, you're councilwoman, you're a public figure, you're not gonna call the police. And he was just pushing me around until when he strangled me, I ran away and I was able to call 911. When the police came to home, they were very good, they were very polite. They immediately pulled him out. They had two officers talking with him, 2 officers talking to me. And what I can say to you is they didn't know what to do with me. They didn't know what to do with me. I was a nervous wreck. I was a freaking nervous wreck. I was just strangled by the man that I married. They didn't know what to do with me. I, on the other hand, was in shock. All I kept on telling them was, I just need to go to sleep. I have a big day at work tomorrow. Because that's all I was worrying about. I couldn't think of anything else. I have a big day at work tomorrow. I have to sleep. I need to get up early. I couldn't sleep. I took 2 Tylenol PM. I couldn't sleep even with 2 Tylenol PM. And I'm the kind of person that with 2 regular Tylenol, I go to sleep. Trust me. I was in such a shock. My state of mind was so badly that I couldn't sleep with 2 Tylenol PM. I called, luckily, a friend of mine who is like a sister. I sent her a text, I woke her up. She came immediately to me and immediately took care of me. She just retired this year. She was a crisis worker for Northampton County Crisis Department. That's what I needed at that time. The police, like Cici said, they're not caseworkers, they're not mental health care workers, and I even had a conversation back when when this happened. John Morganelli was a DA, and I actually sat with a few members of the domestic violence unit in Northampton County, and the director of Turning Point. She's a good friend of mine, Lori Swinsky, because I was telling her what was missing in here, the police should have had, and she said to me, we work with Northampton County very closely. Everybody in Northampton County Sheriff Department know that if it's a domestic violence situation, they will call Turning Point. They will at least have somebody in the phone talking with that individual that was, just going through this stressful situation, and then decide, because that's an expert, will decide, no, she needs to go to the hospital, or we're going to send a caseworker, a crisis worker to your house. That should have happened. And at that conversation, The conversation was at that point, yes, we need to make sure that we work closely with crisis intervention, that we work closely with Turning Point, so that when there's a situation like this and the police officer go to your house, they know how to handle it, because again, they don't have the training to deal with it. And I'm not saying the police officers were rude to me, or I was, now at that point, I just wanted to go to sleep. I was just a wreck. But when I think about it again and again, they didn't know what to do. They didn't know what to do. And they should have just called crisis intervention in Northampton County or Turning Point, the caseworker, and have someone that's what they do, talk to me and calm me down and, put me to sleep, if you wish. So when I talk about defunding the police, again, after I worked for 6.5 years with the Allentown Police Department, building their relationship. And I also have to say, a lot of the individuals that I see, like the Colbert, that Ian and Yolanda Colbert, they're still up there, fighting the fights. And they were part of the team that I trained, just like Tatiana Tuli, many leaders that are still out there fighting the fight. They learned, they understood, they found their voice, and they're still fighting and pushing for what they believe is the right thing to do. And that is something that, to me, we need to get back to, and it has to happen.
Thank you, Councilwoman Negron.
Could I say one other thing?
Yes.
Because this is awfully important. We all have seen what's happened in Portland in the last couple of days. We have got to pray that has to stop. We can't. We've got to call our federal elected officials and tell them. We need to get on the phone and tell Donald Trump, cut the crap out. Let's be honest. What you got in front of you tonight, folks, if you're not paying attention, is for very strong people, very strong personalities. And I don't even have to tell them this, because they already know. We're not here to rubber stamp a damn thing. We're here to do what we are elected to do and to do our job. But we need to make sure that what's happening out there never comes this way. I don't think it ever will. But we have got to put it out there that the craziness that this president is doing by sending federal law enforcement people in to beat the hell out of people is absolutely insane. I just wanted to say that.
Thank you. We have time for one last question, although we do have many more on our list, but we'll conclude with this one. Is there any thought on your end or the government end about having any anti-racist, anti-Semitic curriculum elements in our public education?
Wow. Can I take this one first?
Sure.
As a former school board member and president, vice president, I went through the gamut while I was there, and we asked a question at our conversation that we had, courageous conversation, and we're going to do that again. Matter of fact, just so everybody knows, probably heading to Arts Quest to do something in the near future. Here's the issue with that: if we don't tell our school districts to start putting minority history into our programs, we're going nowhere, because a lot of kids are not being taught what happened in the 60s with Dr. King. A lot of kids aren't being taught how the Tuskegee Airmen fought in World War II, or how segregation was done that way. They don't know about segregation. They don't know about white bathrooms, black bathrooms. Until we get to our administrators in the school district and tell them they need to start adding curriculum, we're not going to go anywhere. And that conversation was even asked all the police chiefs. How many of you ever took a Black history course? One hand went up out of all the folks we had there. So until we can get it into our school systems, and then when you find a teacher who made a mistake here in Easton, I'm going to tell you about this. There was a young lady in the class, and she asked the question, why don't we have more Black history? And the teacher looked at her and said, I don't even know why we have Black history. That then and there was a red flag, and I addressed it as a board member at the time. Matter of fact, I was president. I went right to that principal and said, you need to straighten this young man out, either fire him, do what you got to do, but that needs to be part of our curriculum. And if anybody else wants to chime in on that, be my guest.
No, I completely agree. And I think one of the terms is called whitewashing in our education systems. I think that the history of the Jewish community needs to go in depth in all schools. And I think the history of Blacks in our country needs to go in depth. And we can't just, stop with Frederick Douglass and, Harriet Tubman. There needs to be a wider array of people that have contributed to this country, okay, from both the Black, Hispanic, as well as the Jewish groups. We can't just have this, whitewashing of things. It does nothing for all of our children. My son is biracial as well, and as a Black mother, raising him in the Parkland School District, I do see, at least I had time during this Corona, pandemic to go through schooling with him and be his teacher. So I got to see a little bit, but it's not enough by far. And we need to, if these things are taught to our children from the very beginning, when they are so innocent and they are just interested in right or wrong. And some kids, when you get them at a certain age, they're even too young they notice color. We're not going to say that kids don't notice color, but color does not deter them from being friends with someone else. Religion does not deter them from being friends with someone else. So if we can integrate these studies in our children's schooling from a young age and graduate the process as they get older, and talk about maybe more complex issues, I think that's a start. And I think the other thing that we need to really look into, and this was something I talked about during my campaigning, even though it has absolutely nothing to do with commissioners, is the way that we allocate money to our public school systems. It is systemic segregation. And as long as we continue to do that, we are going to continue to poorly educate minority children. And it's not fair, it's not right. And the purpose of public schools was to level out the playing fields from the very beginning of those that had generational wealth that were able to put their children in private schools. So then public schools were meant to level out the educational playing field, but it is doing the exact opposite in minority communities. And these are things that absolutely should be addressed.
Thank you.
Yeah, we've got to teach our kids that they come from a place of pride. For many students, for Black students, that means kings and queens in Africa. For Puerto Rican students, that means from proud indigenous folks. How do I say it? The Taino, if I said that right, Olga, not correct me. We've got to teach our students their roots, all students, because if you don't know where you come from, how do you know where you're going? And it's not just for students of color. It's also for our white students. White students, I had this this town hall, I think it was last week, and I had students from Parkland, Black students from Parkland and Emmaus, and they, they're in majority white school districts, and they talked about, how important it is for their friends, most of whom are white, to see the value in their culture, the Black culture, and for the Hispanic culture, so that this immediate default of white is better, white is superior, white people are the teachers, white people are the principals, white, eventually it almost like colonizes your mind, where even students of color start to look at white as being superior and being better. I remember in 2015 or so, back when I was on the school board, it was some type of contest, and they had to show what equality looks like. And so they had a hand reaching down to help another hand. The hand that was on top reaching down was white. The hand that was being helped was brown. And I mean, it might seem like just something so little and trivial, but no, it gets ingrained in your mind like, oh no, like the white people are here to help, and they know more, and they're here to save the day, and we just have to follow their lead. I know that the students on the Allen basketball team, they've been told, you know, you can't wear your do-rags because you'll intimidate people. You know, you can't wear hoodies, you'll intimidate people. You've got to change who you are, change how you speak, change how you look, change how you act, so that other people will feel comfortable around you. That's not right.
Thank you, Cece.
So even though the work that I do as a member of city council doesn't have much to do with school, I at least will say that I've been paying attention to Dr. Roy here in the city Bethlehem area school district, and he has come up front. I think he gets it, and he has outspoken. There have been several articles in the paper about taking a look at the books that they're using and the curriculums that they're teaching, and he is talking about making changes in the curriculum beginning in middle school and high schools, like right away. So I'm keeping an eye on that, and I'm really hoping that he goes through it with that. It's going to cost money because, of course, that means changing, you know, buying new books and making new curriculums or whatnot. But I appreciate that he, as the leader of the school district, gets it and understand how important it is to include everybody's side of the story and the real story when he's talking about curriculum and even the books, changing the books that are being used. So I am really hoping that does happen, because it does, like everybody else said, it has to. That's the only way we can make these changes, beginning with the education of our children. So I think that's I'm looking forward. I will keep an eye on what they're doing over there.
Thank you.
Just one other thing. CC said something very important, that we've got to change who we are to be accepted. I found it interesting running for council this time that there was a man who was part of the campaign or just throughout the county, and he told me that I need to smile because they don't like looking at a big angry black man. That's so ridiculous, and we shouldn't have to put up with this noise. Be you and you'll be fine. And that's all I want to say about it. And one other thing that we've just passed at county level, and the executive put it out, CARES Act money we got. We decided that, and we sent out 100,000, 50,000 to all the school districts in Northampton County to help those who do not have internet get internet in case they have to be at home, so they'll have access to learning at school. So that's part of what we did, and I thought it was a great idea that we did that. I'm hoping that Lehigh County does the same thing for their students, because I know if we have it down here, I'm sure they have the same problem. But that's what we did with our CARES Act money.
Thank you. Well, I'm going to wrap this up and bring it to a close, but I want to give a sincere thank you to our participants, Councilwoman Gerlach, Councilwoman Negron, Commissioner Smalls, and Councilman Myers. It's really kind of you to volunteer your time to speak to us on these important topics, and we really do appreciate it. Our next event coming up is on August 6th at 7 p.m. It's in partnership with the Jewish Family Service. Again, August 6th at 7. It's a discussion on identity, power, and privilege with David Jones. And if you want to sign up on that, I'm sure you can find more information at the Federation website. And also, I just want to finally say, just encourage everyone, regardless of your political affiliation, to vote in November. It is astronomically important. So thank you very much, and I'm going to sign off, and everyone have a great evening.
Thank you.
Take care.
Have a good night.
Thank you for having us.
This was great.
This was, I
Thank
think
you
we
for having it.
have
Thank you for having us.
round two.
All right.
Oh, yeah, I'm for that.
Thanks.
Round two.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Hey.